Oh, sure. Yeah, no. Yeah, go for it. So, yeah, yeah. There you go.
Live from St. Mark Baptist Church in Little Rock, Arkansas, this is a special presentation. Meet the Candidates, a Little Rock Mayoral Candidate Forum.
We have 4 candidates here tonight. We'll have the opportunity to hear from each of them, and you could say this is a job interview of sorts. I'm Pamela Smith, the Communications Director for the Little Rock School District.
And I'm Mark DeMoss, founding pastor of the Mosaic Church of Central Arkansas, and so honored to be here with my good friend Pamela Smith to moderate tonight's discussion. It's not a debate, it's a discussion to introduce these 4 candidates to the city. As we said, tonight the 4 candidates for mayor are on the stage to answer questions that were submitted by the people of Little Rock, and on a variety of topics, actually, from infrastructure, economic development, crime, and jobs. And before we continue, we certainly want to thank Pastor Philip Pointer, the good folk at St. Mark Baptist, for their vision in hosting this event, and Ben Parkinson from Fellowship and the partnership that you two show in the churches here in the city and the good spirit that's here. Let's give them a hand and thank them for hosting tonight.
Mark, you know, we have a fantastic audience here tonight, and I'm sure we have quite a few folks watching at home. It's going to be a very spirited discussion, but you'll have an opportunity to learn a lot about these candidates, hearing directly from them.
Yeah, and it's wonderful to have such engagement from the community, both online and as well as right here. So without further ado, we want to go from left to right and introduce the candidates: Baker Curris, Frank Scott Jr., Warwick Sabin, and Vincent Tolliver, and allow you men to introduce yourself in 30 seconds, if you would, to the audience viewing tonight. Baker, we'll begin with you, Mr. Curris.
I've been a lawyer, a businessman, and a community volunteer in Little Rock for 38 years. I served on the Little Rock School Board for 12 years. I served as the superintendent of Little Rock School District for 14 months. I've been married for 36 years as of last night. I have 3 children who all live in Little Rock and who all graduated from the Little Rock School District. I'm very, very proud of that. I have a background, I have the experience, I have the knowledge, but I also have the vision and the passion to do this job. My name is Baker Curris, and I earnestly seek your support for this mayoral position.
Good evening. First, I want to say thank you to my Lord Jesus Christ, and thank you to Pastors Pointer, Parkinson, for bringing us together this evening to discuss Little Rock's future. My name is Frank Scott Jr., born, raised, and still reside in Southwest Little Rock. I'm a product of Little Rock Public Schools, a minister, a banker, a former senior advisor to Governor Mike Beebe, a former highway commissioner. The reason why I'm running for mayor of my hometown is because I want to help unify our city, increase jobs, help create a world-class education system, and engage our youth to make certain that it's time for a new era of leadership in Little Rock that we can move forward. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm Warwick Sabin, and I'm excited for this opportunity to talk about the future of our city. We are facing some significant challenges, to be sure, from crime and public safety to the quality of our public schools, jobs and economic opportunity, as well as building and maintaining our infrastructure. But all of those challenges can be overcome with bold, inclusive, and visionary leadership. I want to bring new energy and new ideas to City Hall, as well as a track record of achieving real results through 6 years in the state legislature, my track record in the private sector, and my community service. And I look forward to bringing positive change to Little Rock as your next mayor. Thank you.
Good evening, Little Rock. Good evening, St. Mark Baptist Church. You know, voters are experiencing an erosion of trust, and the levels are staggering. Our campaign, known as the People's Campaign, seeks to rebuild that trust. So, on behalf of the People's Campaign, my name is Vincent Tolliver, and it is an honor and privilege to be running for mayor of the great city of Little Rock, and I am working extremely hard to earn your votes.
Thank you. Well, thank you, gentlemen, and we certainly as a city want to thank you for throwing your hats in the ring, so to speak, and we appreciate you being here certainly tonight. I know you all have clapped for them individually. Let's give them all a round of applause and tell them thank you for what they're doing tonight.
Well, now we get down to business, gentlemen. It's time for questions. We want to say thank you to KRK and Fox 16, of course, the viewers who submitted questions. We received many, and unfortunately, our time will not allow us to get to all of them, but we will address as many as we can. The questions have been edited for brevity and clarity. Each candidate will have the opportunity to answer questions from their own perspective and not use this time to discuss another candidate's campaign or position. As we mentioned previously, this is not a debate. This is a forum. In no particular order, each candidate will be given 60 seconds to answer each question with a 10-second grace period. And candidates, we do not want to have to buzz you, so we please ask that you adhere to the time and be respectful of each other as you respond to the questions. Mark and I will be alternating our questions, and we will ensure that the candidates do not exceed their allotted time per question. So we're going to toss it to Mark to ask the first question. Mark.
Thank you, Pamela. And for this first question, we'll just go right down the line, beginning with you, Mr. Curris. The question was submitted, it was this. Little Rock Police reports that violent crime is down 24%, property crime is down 14%, and overall crime in Little Rock is down 16%. But too many residents, it doesn't feel this way. What would you do to continue the downward trends and also to change perceptions?
Well, the first thing we have to do is push on with our full staffing at the police department. We're finally almost up to full staffing, which is 207 officers on the ground patrolling, approximately 550 officers. Got another class that's graduating this Friday. So we have to fully staff, which we have not been fully staffed. That's going to be a real challenge in our budget because we've basically balanced our budget the last several years by not staffing and having these open, unfilled positions. That's the first thing. Then we have to continue this interagency work that we've been doing. It worked back in the 90s, if you recall, when we had serious trouble in our town with violent crime. Interagency cooperation, intergovernmental cooperation, because the crimes don't just start and stop at our city limits. They keep going. And this kind of intergovernmental cooperation has made a huge difference, and we need to continue that very dramatically. Now, the community policing aspects that we need to undertake and really get behind will be possible if we're fully staffed, as we will be. And that's, community policing is essential in our town to build public trust and to keep the public fully informed, and I think that's something that we can do. We'll talk about it a little bit sooner. It's a philosophy, it's not a program, but when officers can get in neighborhoods and have time to meet and greet people, that's what they need to do.
Thank you. Mr. Scott.
What we've learned in our frank discussions in Southwest Little Rock, in the Petaway neighborhood, or even in Pleasant Valley Owners Association, is that crime is a critical issue in our city today. But we also understand that crime answering issues that have results that relates to poverty and education. As a minister, I've to too many funerals in this city as a result of crime. What we have to do is create more opportunities and more jobs and focus more on educational achievement to create crime prevention. However, from a tactical standpoint, We have to increase our workforce as it relates to our Little Rock Police Department so we can have true community policing. I would commit to increasing our police force from 593 to 700 police officers. In addition to that, we have to make certain that those same police officers reflect our community and understand our community. As they reflect our community and understand our community, we need to make certain they understand de-escalation tactics, implicit bias, and true diversity and inclusion training. If we do that, we will have crime prevention efforts in this city, and I look forward to being your mayor one day to execute this plan. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Saban.
Thank you. Everywhere I go in the city, I meet somebody who's been victimized by violent crime, or who feels violated because their home has been burglarized, or their car has been broken into, or someone who's called 911 and the police haven't responded. Or I talk to the police and say they wish they could respond better, but they don't have the resources or the manpower. I talk to business leaders who can't recruit people into Little Rock, or real estate agents who can't sell a home because of our violent crime problem, or people who won't visit or shop in Little Rock because of our violent crime problem. We had 85 vacant police officer positions when I started my exploratory committee about a year ago. We need to make sure our police are fully staffed and fully resourced, but we also need to make sure we get back to community policing, which was a strategy that worked in Little Rock because the police were in the neighborhoods, they had better relations with the community, and could respond more quickly. We also have to make sure that this is not fully the burden of just the police. We can work with code enforcement, with youth services, with community programs to make sure that it's a citywide effort to prevent and enforce the law. And I will make sure as mayor that this is my critical and urgent priority going into office. Thank you.
Well, thank you. Mr. Tolliver.
You know, when I think about crime and safety in Little Rock, I think about the status, the statistics, the data. I live in Ward 1, and what we know from living in Ward 1 is that 35% of the crime in the city actually happens in Ward 1. I am a fan of community policing, but I'm also a fan of leadership from the top. I think we need to look at the leadership of the Little Rock Police Department. I think that we need to deploy police officers in Ward 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 on the ground. I think we need to work with the neighborhood associations to make sure that we are partnering with them. So if you see something, say something. I believe in community policing. It works. It's proven. What we don't have in the city of Little Rock is a culture that believes in community policing. We don't have enough officers out walking the streets. We don't have enough officers walking, riding on bicycles. When I'm mayor of the city of Little Rock, we'll have both. We will have bicycles deployed all over the city. We will have officers working with the neighborhood associations and the people who are in charge of the neighborhood associations, working with them closely and walking all over the city, because what the community needs is police officers that they trust.
Okay.
They do not need police officers that are rotating in and out of communities.
Thank
so
you,
when
Mr.
I'm mayor,
Tolliver.
I will make sure that
Thank you.
police officers, community, the wards
Pamela,
in which we live.
Thank you so much. Don't mean to cut you off, but we're trying to keep it on time schedule. Thank you for your answer, sir.
And
Pamela.
gentlemen, if you will direct your attention to the lovely timekeeper on the front row, she will help us all stay on track. And also one other quick note, gentlemen, if you would please hold your microphone closer to the top and not the base. That will help eliminate the static. Thank you. So our next question now has to do with racial discrimination. Some people believe that racial discrimination is a factor in the makeup of the city's board of directors, particularly the at-large positions. And with petitions currently circulating, do you believe at-large city director positions should be eliminated? And we're going to start with you, Mr. Saban.
Thank you. Well, this is no judgment on the people who currently occupy those offices, but I definitely am in favor of eliminating the at-large positions for the city board. I believe that the history of our city speaks to the reason why the at-large directors were created in the first place. It goes back to the 1950s, and the idea was really to try to offset communities of color and the representation and the power that they might have in city government. I think there are a lot of issues with our city government right now that could be fixed through systemic change. I think a lot of progress in our city is impeded because we have a very dysfunctional city government, and almost everything about the system is designed and built against itself. I think the at-large directors are one place to start to make sure that we have direct representation, ward by ward, that people know that their representatives are accountable to them where they live, and that they can hold those people responsible at the ballot box in a fair election.
Thank you, Mr. Sabin. We're going to move on to you, Mr. Scott.
Growing up in Little Rock, I've seen different iterations of our city government. What we found is that there are many voices that aren't at the table. But sooner or later, the voices of the voiceless will speak up. And what they've been doing is speaking up that there is some discontent with our current form of government. My philosophy is for greater representation. Right now, we do not have greater representation in our city. And I would be in favor of repurposing our at-large city directors, but a little bit differently. We would change those 3 at-large city directors and make those ward directors. I firmly believe due to the landmass of West Little Rock, there's a need for an additional West Little Rock city director. There's a need for additional Southwest Little Rock city director. And there's also a need for a dedicated Midtown city director. And so what I would like to do is to see the form of government move from at-large city directors to all wards, and it would be moving from 7 ward directors to 10. We have to have greater representation so all voices are heard, because there are all different types of aspects in our city to move forward, and it's time to unify our city and listen to all voices. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. Mr. Tolliver.
I absolutely believe that we should not have at-large city directors. And I want to give credit where credit is due. I am very pleased that my city director, Director Irma Hendricks, led the charge, and she got the petition circulating. I was one of the first to sign them. I certainly believe, because for me, it disenfranchises the voters. We have 7 wards in this city, and 7 wards come with 7 city directors. The at-large city directors have a tendency to have an imbalance in the government of the city, and so I would like to see stronger city directors. I would like to see them empowered the way that they should be empowered, and I would not like to see city directors at large, because I don't think it's good for Little Rock.
Thank you very much. Mr. Kurz?
Well, our form of city government was last examined in 2007, so the voters had a choice then. If you look at electing a mayor citywide and understand that that's appropriate and fair, then I don't quite understand why electing 3 people citywide who've done excellent work, including ones in the room right now, the longest tenured city director has been elected and reelected and reelected and reelected citywide. So as easy as it would be to say that that's not working for our city, I think you ought to examine the work that these people have been doing. Now, what I will do, if the city wants to have this discussion, and I think it's a healthy one, if I'm elected mayor, in January or early February, we'll have the same process that we had that gave us the Vision Little Rock and Future Little Rock processes that we had to get us to where we are now. An open community discussion where we involve people and decide what's best for our city, and then pull together. Because the notion that somehow this is a divisive issue is easy to say, but I don't see the evidence of that. I don't see it happening, and I don't see it happening on the board itself. Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. This next question has to do with development and potential displacement, submitted by a viewer. It reads this way: downtown Little Rock has seen a big revival over the last number of years, while other areas of the city, such as the 12th Street corridor or potentially the University District, have not. What would you like to see in these areas of the city, other areas beyond downtown, and how would you ensure that development won't lead to displacement? Mr. Tall, we'll begin with you.
Sure, thank you for the question, Mark. I'd like to see a number of things. First and foremost, I'd like to see developers who get tax credits, subsidies from the city. I'd like to hold them accountable for the things that they would say they do in exchange, say that they will do in exchange for the subsidies and the tax credit. For example, I'd like to see the city directors get behind what is called a subsidy clawback. And what the subsidy clawback does, it is a contract clause that provides a money-back guarantee if developers fail to fulfill the promises that made them get the subsidy in the first place. That holds the developers accountable. It's good for the city. It's good for the people, and it's a policy that makes sense.
Thank you. Mr. Kurz, we'll go to you next.
I've spent a lot of time in the Central City, and when I say that, I mean the area roughly bounded by the railroad tracks west of Central High School all the way south to I-30 and then back west to University. And it's a marvelous area with beautiful real estate, approximately 8,000 vacant lots in our city right now. 22% of the homes in that area are vacant. 13% of the lots. 35% of the lots and homes around Central High School are vacant. So the displacement notion is one we need to consider. And the residents I talk to are good folks, nice people, take care of what they have. What's getting us in that area and what's really hurting our city in many, many ways is the fact that so many of these vacant properties are deteriorating rapidly. They're not generating any revenue, yet they cause a lot of compliance problems and code problems. And I'm going to post on my website, I think it's up already, a revitalization piece that discusses this in much more detail than one could give you in a minute. But if you go to my website, you'll see it. And that's the secret to Little Rock. It builds a community, it builds a sense of place, and it's a marvelous area, and it has to be revitalized, and you can get all those details on the website.
Thank you, Mr. Kurz. Mr. Saban.
Thank you. As mayor, my economic development strategy will be focused on small business and entrepreneurship because I think it's the most effective, most sustainable, and most equitable kind of economic development. And if you look at the history of the city of Little Rock, all of the companies that we brag about that we're most proud of, from Alltel, Axiom, Stevens, Dillard's, they weren't brought in from outside. They were born here as small entrepreneurial ventures. And we need to keep that in mind because this is something that I do in my private sector work at Winrock International. I created the Arkansas Regional Innovation Hub to give resources to entrepreneurs to start businesses. I passed legislation to support entrepreneurship and small business because I believe that if we have a program to support small business and entrepreneurs in every part of the city, then we can have revitalization without gentrification because we're economically empowering the people who live in those neighborhoods to start those businesses, to hire people in their neighborhoods, to revitalize those buildings, and really make it happen. We've seen this happen in cities like Memphis and Chattanooga and Louisville, great models for us to follow, but it starts by having an equitable economic development strategy that begins and ends with our small business and entrepreneurial community.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much. Mr. Scott, final word on development.
Growing up here in Little Rock, I see, as I leave my house every morning from Southwest Little Rock, I go to Ranch Drive, and I see how different our city is. It's time for a comprehensive urban plan for our city, that we truly cast a vision for it, set comprehensive strategies, and execute. How do we execute? We have to have a mayor that's going to be the driver of business development in our city in every sector of the area. What does that look like? In West Little Rock is growing, so we have to support that growth, but we also have to make certain that we improve the infrastructure of the South End, the East End, and Southwest Little Rock so it can be the foundation of economic development. If we have comprehensive urban planning, if we improve our infrastructure, we have a mayor that's going to be the driver of business development and not outsource economic development to the Chamber of Commerce. We have to set and start an economic development corporation that is led by the mayor right here, right now, and it's time for this change. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. We are moving on to our next question now, and it does have a hint of economic development linked to it. As mayor, how would you attract and retain employers and good-paying jobs that provide opportunities for citizens of all ages and all skill sets? And we will start, I believe, with let's start with Mr. Scott.
To continue on with economic development, we have to have on day one, if I'm blessed to become your mayor, I'm going to bring all of the business owners, all those business entities on one table, help them understand that we have to applaud our friends in Northwest Arkansas and take a page out of their playbook and institute more of our regional networks to locate their jobs here right now so we can go to Dallas, go to Atlanta, and say, hey, you got 50 jobs right there in Dallas and Atlanta, but you have a financial capital epicenter right here, right now. You're 1 or 2 phone calls away from a governor. Bring your jobs here for our quality of life. Secondly, we have to grow our own, and we have to take care of our existing entrepreneurs who are committing to the ministry of our citizens and have to cut the red tape and no longer be an impediment to business growth in our city to make certain that it expands everywhere in our city, no matter where it's located. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Scott. We'll turn to you now, Mr. Kurz.
If we want to attract national business into our city, first we have to do is get off these hot lists for violent crime. Simple as that. If you've got a bunch of people looking at Little Rock, They're not coming here for fourth, as the FBI says we were in the first half of 2017 in violent crime. We've got to fix that, but we can fix that, and it's being fixed right now. The second thing we have to do is understand that we do hatch a lot of business here. At the FinTech Center, we hatched 4 businesses. We incubated them, and they flew the coop. They left Little Rock, and the reason they did is quality of life. They want a sense of place. They want a nice place to live. They can go anywhere. Most businesses now that are virtually located anywhere. And Little Rock is a wonderful town, but it has to be a wonderful town and a wonderful place to live, and it can be. But that happens in neighborhoods, neighborhood by neighborhood. It becomes a safer place. It becomes a prettier place. It becomes a place where people enjoy living next to their neighbors in good schools. It all happens when retail comes with the rooftops, and that rooftop development is what we're missing right now. We're hollowing out this city from the inside out by neglecting the inner city, and that's what happens. You see growth out west, which is marvelous, but we had more demolitions last year and 2 planning zones than we had new building permits. That has to stop, and code enforcement can help there. It's a very important thing.
All right, thank you, Mr. Curris. Mr. Sabin.
The most valuable commodity in the 21st century economy is talent. It's our human capital. And we need to make sure we know how to develop, retain, and attract talent. And I talked earlier about entrepreneurship and small business, and I still think that's the most critical component of building a sustainable economy here in Little Rock. But let's also talk about how do we make sure that we are preparing our young people and our adults for the jobs of the 21st century? Because there are jobs available even right now that our young people coming out of high school don't have the skills to take. And we're not providing the avenues for them to get access to the education and the skills development to take those jobs. And so I want to see Little Rock really adhere to the private sector with our school district and our technical colleges and make sure that we're creating apprenticeship programs and other opportunities to really join our young people. And by the way, our community that's coming out of prison to be able to get the skills they need to take the jobs that are available, build that human capital pool here in Little Rock, and that will attract more companies, as we've seen happen in other cities around the country.
Thank you very much. Mr. Tolliver.
When I think about attracting businesses to the city, the first thing that comes to mind is the human capital, the talent. So to the table, I would bring businesses, but not only would I bring businesses to the table, I would look at the institutions that we have in the city. Philander Smith College, the University of Arkansas at Little Rock, Arkansas Baptist College. Those schools produce some incredibly talented young people. I would also focus on millennial engagement. Millennials are at the cutting edge of technology. They are intelligent, they are smart, they are savvy. I would bring the millennials to the table, and we would all sort of figure out a way to make this thing work, because when you talk about the quality of life in Little Rock, you really can't beat it. Little Rock is just under 200,000 people. You can get anywhere in the city in less than 20 minutes. The traffic is sometimes heavy, but only in the morning, so you can navigate the city easily. I would make sure that we reach out to everyone in the city and we develop the neighborhoods in a fashion that would reach out and attract people across the business spectrum, across industries. It's all about the talent. It's all about neighborhood revitalization and make sure
Mr.
that
Tolliver,
the neighborhoods
that's our
are attractive.
time.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mark?
Yes, final question in this segment, gentlemen. Given the current political climate and painfully polarized divisions of race, class, and culture, how would you lead the city and its citizens to embrace unity, one another, and the common good beyond the distinctions of our society that so often and otherwise divide?
Thank you very much. We're going to take that question in just a few minutes, but we want to thank all of those who've been watching us on KARK4 and Fox 16. This actually is going to conclude our television broadcasted portion of the forum, but we hope you will stay with us as we continue our discussion on Facebook. You can find this live stream by visiting St. Mark's page or KARK's or Fox 16's page. You can join us now. Thank you. All right, now you can take the question.
I want to welcome all of you back to our mayor discussion here with 4 candidates and those of you joining us live on Facebook. We finished that last segment with a question, didn't have time to answer it, so we'll throw it back. And Mr. Sabin, we'll start with you. Let me read that question again. Given the current